Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Dominion Plunder expansion. Now, there are tons of these treasure loot cards in this game, and since loot is new to Dominion, I thought we'd go over and talk about loot cards first. So let's get started. So first of all, the loot cards, which is this entire stack of cards here, okay? They cannot be bought, okay? They can only be gained by various means, by either doing something with a certain card or by purchasing an event, for instance. Like, for instance, this looting event, if it's purchased, you gain a loot. Now, these are always face down, so you just don't know what loot you're going to get, but there's two of each in the pile, so you just never know what you're going to get. Another possible way is by playing a particular card from the Kingdom supply, or by doing certain things. Like, for instance, this Jeweled Egg says that when you trash this card, you'll gain a loot. So, by obviously various means, you'll be able to get loot. Now, all loot cards cost 7 money. So they're always going to cost 7, which is obviously one more than gold, technically. But that's something important to note as well. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the different loot cards real quick, since they're all basically going to be the same with a different variation. So Sextant here, it's going to get you 3 money, it's going to get you a buy, and then you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can discard any number and put the rest back in any order. So it's a nice card of, going through your deck and getting rid of cards you don't want. And you're also getting 3 money and a buy, so that's useful. Orb, you get to look through your discard pile, so you can choose one. You can play an action, or treasure from it, or you can just simply get an extra buy and 3 money. So maybe you don't have any good action cards or good treasure cards in the discard pile, so if you don't, then you can just simply get a buy or 3 money. But if you play this during your buy phase, obviously, then you're getting to look through your discard pile and possibly play an action, even though it's your buy phase, right? So it's kind of interesting. There might be some other action cards that actually let you play this during the action phase, and if that's the case, then I could see the orb being very useful for sure, especially if you have a discard pile full of cards. The figurehead, you just get 3 money when you play it. So basically almost all of these, if not all of these, are going to give you 3 money regardless. So it's like, so you should always go for loot, because they're always going to give you 3 money. So that's, that's better than gold. But you should always go for them, because you're always going to get some interesting ability too. But then at the start of your next turn, you get 2 cards. So this will stay in play because it's a duration, but you get 2 cards at the start of your next turn. So don't tell me that's not better than gold, because that certainly is way better than gold. So this is like, loot is like basically almost going to remove the need to even buy gold, because you're just going to have these, and there's going to be something you can do with each one of these. So it's going to be a gold with a special power, basically. So Insignia is pretty cool, because when you, this turn, when you gain a card, you can put it on top of your deck. Now, there's a particular card in this game that this will work really well with, and I'll mention it later. But, man, that's a pretty good card. Getting to utilize cards much sooner is pretty cool. The Hammer, you get 3 money, which is awesome. But then you can get a card cost down to 4. That's sweet. It's a sweet deal. The Shield is a reaction card. So not only can you play it for its action, not only can you play it for its treasure, which is 3 money and a buy, but you can also reveal it from your hand when another player plays an attack card to be unaffected by it. So basically, it's a mult/gold with a buy. That's cool. So, but there's only 2 of these, so the chances of everyone getting one is not possible. But if you're playing a 2-player game, it's still not likely. Double balloons. It's basically a gold, but when you get it, you also gain a gold, so you're basically getting 2 golds just by simply gaining this. That's pretty cool. That's still good. Prize Goat, you get 3 money and a buy, but then you may trash a card from your hand, so it's a nice way of getting rid of cards you don't want. The Puzzle Box is going to give you 3 money and a buy. but you may set aside a card from your hand face down and then put it into your hand at end of turn. So that's kind of interesting. If maybe you have some card you weren't able to utilize, an action card, so you can save it for your next turn maybe. That's pretty cool. Cool. But remember, you're putting it into your hand at your end of turn. That means you're only drawing 4 cards your next turn. And 4 here, either now or at the start of your next turn, you get a buy and 3 money. So, you know, I guess it just depends on what you're planning on buying this turn, but potentially you could save it for later because it is a duration. Endless Chalice. Now, and at the start of each of your turns for the rest of the game, you get +1 money and a buy. So this is like the only one that doesn't really potentially give you, 3 money, but you get 1 money for the rest of the game, extra for every single turn. That's pretty cool, and that means you're also getting an additional buy as well. So you'll have 2 buys for the rest of the game. That's pretty cool. I like that. The Sword is an attack card, but it's, going to give 3 money and a buy, but everyone else, each other player discards down to 4 cards in hand, so it's a weaker militia for sure, but hey, if you're not playing with any cards that make you discard down to 3 cards in hand anyway, then this could be useful to throw your opponents off once in a while at least. The Jewels is pretty cool because not only is it obviously giving you 3 money and a buy, but at the start of your next turn, so you play it, it's a duration card, but then at the start of your next turn, you put this on the bottom of your deck. That could be useful. Maybe your deck has a very thin amount of cards. Then you could potentially play this again much sooner. That's really cool. And even if it's a deck full of cards, you'll still get to play it much sooner than you would simply discarding it. So that's cool. The Staff, you get 3 money and a buy, but you also may play an action from your hand. So that could potentially be useful if you're able to play this treasure on your action phase. That could especially be useful too. So that's pretty cool. So that's all the different types of loot in the game, minus one that I just did not like, so we won't talk about it. So now let's go ahead and talk about the events next. Let's get these over with. There's some events in here that are pretty cool, but some of them are just kind of like so-so. Obviously, that's pretty useful, that's definitely a better choice. 6 money for a loot, way better than a gold, definitely. Maelstrom's probably my favorite one. For a cost of 4 money, you can trash 3 cards from your hand. It's a good way of getting rid of those cards you don't want, but it also hurts your opponents potentially, but also could help them out potentially. So it's really interesting, but it's not something they can just simply block because it's an event, not an attack card. So still, I like this a lot, especially since it's basically a potential attack. The Journey, once per turn, if the previous turn wasn't yours, you don't discard cards from play and clean up this turn and take an extra turn after this one. Well, that's kind of interesting. You don't discard the cards that you have in play and clean up this turn. And then you take an extra turn after this one. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not exactly sure how that would work, honestly. I haven't gotten a chance to play this one and see this one in action, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out when I do finally play it. So I'm not sure on how that one actually works. The Scrounge, choose one, trash a card from your hand, or gain an estate from the trash. If you did, you gain a card costing up to 5. Well, that's cool. So you choose an option. You can trash a card from your hand. You can gain an estate from the trash. And then if you did, you gain a card costing up to 5. So you get rid of a weak card, get a 5 costing card for the price of 3. That's pretty nice. I like that. Prepare for 3. Set aside your hand face up. At the start of your next turn, play those actions and treasures in any order. Then discard the rest. Well, that's cool. If you still have some treasures in hand that you decided not to utilize, or some actions you weren't able to play, you could basically prepare them for next turn. That's pretty cool. Getting to play them at the beginning of your next turn, that's even better. That's a really cool event. Peril, for the price of 2, you may trash an action card from your hand to gain a loot. So, if you maybe have an action card that you don't think you're going to utilize anymore, or it was just situational, for instance, or something like that. Or maybe there just doesn't seem to be any ways of getting loot in this game, or you're not gaining any. So, but if this was in the game, that might be worth doing if you want to get some loot. Mirror, for the price of 3, you get a plus buy, and then the next time you gain an action card this turn, you gain a copy of it. Well, that's cool, getting 2. Getting 2, and assuming you have more money, you could potentially get something cool. The launch, another 3 costing event. Once per turn, return to your action phase. You get a card, you get an action, you get a buy. So not only do you return to your action phase, but you're getting a card, you're getting another action, and you're getting a buy. The buy maybe is actually pretty useful because then you would be able to return to your buy phase with a buy, in case you didn't have one to begin with, right? Because you utilized your other buy. But maybe the next card ends up being good, something you can utilize, you know. Even if it isn't, possibly, you might have an action card in your hand you weren't able to utilize this turn. So launch could be very situational, useful for sure. Foray, discard 3 cards, revealing them. If they have 3 different names, you gain a loot. Well, that's cool. You could, for instance, if you had a copper and an estate, maybe a minus point card, you have those 3 in your hand, potentially, you could discard them to get yourself a loot. That's something cool if you never got rid of your estates or your minus point cards or your coppers for that matter. And even if that wasn't the case, you probably might have some cards you weren't able to utilize. Maybe there are 3 different cards you weren't able to utilize. Or maybe there's a province in there somewhere or something. Who knows? Okay, then there's Rush. This one is worth 2 money, and then gives you an additional buy. And the next time you gain an action card this turn, you get to play it. So if you have a lot of extra money, you want to play an action card early on, maybe there's an attack card you want to get ahead of time, but you want to play it immediately, and you have a little extra money, meaning you have more than enough, two more than enough. This, I would definitely take advantage of that, just to play an attack card much sooner. That's pretty cool. Or any other action for that matter, but personally I would choose an attack card if there was one. Deliver, another 2 costing event, plus 1 buy. This turn, each time you gain a card, set it aside and put it into your hand at the end of turn. Well, that's interesting. So each time you gain a card, you can set it aside and put it into your hand at your turn. So if you have a lot of extra money, once again, you could potentially be getting, and you potentially have more than 1 buy for that matter, you could potentially gain a lot of cards to put into your hand at the end of turn. That's pretty cool. I like that one. Avoid. This one gives you plus buy. The next time you shuffle this turn, pick up to 3 of those cards and put into your discard pile. So you get a buy, 2 money. The next time you shuffle this turn, you pick up 3 of those cards and to put into your discard pile. So I guess basically it's a good way of avoiding all the cards you don't want to be shuffled back into your deck, like maybe some victory cards or some minus point cards, especially if you can't get rid of them, or even something like coppers or something like that. So it's kind of an interesting name, definitely a smart name for sure. Avoid all those cards you don't want. Okay, Invasion. I enjoyed playing with this one. This one's a 10 costing event. It was a lot of fun though. You may play an attack from your hand. Well, that's assuming, of course, you have one, but it doesn't matter. Even if you don't have an attack card from your hand, this is still a really good card. But hey, the fact that you can play an attack card from your hand with this event, especially if you weren't able to utilize that attack card because you didn't have enough actions to play all your attack cards, I like that a lot. But then you also gain a duchy. So hey, you're getting a victory point card, but then you gain an action card onto your deck. And you also gain a loot and then get to play the loot. Oh, man, it's just an awesome event. Invasion, definitely my most favorite event. Yeah, I liked Maelstrom a lot, but this one, when I played this one, I loved this one way, way more. Oh, yes. Invasion. Cool. Then we've got Barry. It's a 1 costing event, so that's interesting. Plus 1 buy, put any card from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck. So interesting. You might have some cards in your discard pile you want to utilize sooner rather than later. Maybe your deck is pretty small. There's not very many cards in it. So this could be a good way of getting to play them much sooner. And for just one money and a buy, considering that's only one, you potentially, it's very useful if you have one additional money that you don't know what to do with. That could be very useful to at least do it once in a while. And then Prosper, another 10 costing event. Gain a loot plus any number of differently named treasures. So you get a loot, which is a treasure card, right? But then if you're playing with a lot of differently named treasures, you can play any number. You can gain any number of the differently named treasures. So you could potentially at least still get a gold and a silver if you want, and a loot. But then if you're playing with other treasure cards where there's a lot of treasure cards in this expansion already, you could potentially be gaining a lot of different treasure cards for the cost of 10 money. That's a really good way of getting tons of treasure cards if you can manage to get this early on. Especially, sometimes there have been times in the very beginning of the game, I actually had 10 money, and it wasn't a good time to buy province yet because it was still very early on in the game. I still had some estates I wasn't able to get rid of and stuff like that. But I had so much money, this would have been very, very handy, especially in that game when they had like 3 or 4 treasures. So that's a really good event. So those are all the events that come with the expansion. And then we've got the traits. Now I've played with a couple of these traits already. So let's talk about them. Traits will give a card basically that ability. You'll randomly choose with the randomizers, most likely. But with the randomizers, you'll basically choose a random card that you just won't know until you've chosen it, right? Randomly, okay? And then that card will have that trait for the rest of the game. And depending on what that trait is what will happen with the card and what you can do with it additionally. It's kind of similar to the ways, in a way, from the Menagerie expansion. It's somewhat similar, but also somewhat different. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about these traits. So at the start of your cleanup phase, you may set aside patient cards from your hand to play them at the start of your next turn. So in fact, this was the card I played Patient with. This was the card that was randomly picked for a game that I played with, and it was Patient. And there was a couple of times when I just didn't have enough actions to play the Fortune Hunter, so I patiently set this aside, and then on my next turn, I was able to play it at the start of my turn. So at the start of my turn, I got 2 treasure. I got to look at 3 cards, and I got to choose a treasure from them, and one of them was a treasure, and I got to play it, and I had some additional money at the start of the turn thanks to this patient trait. That's a pretty cool card. Now, it's just something you can do. It's not something you have to do. It's, for this particular trait anyways, it's something you may do. So that's just really cool. Think of all the possibilities with patient, for sure. Okay, so that's definitely one of my most favorite traits thus far, patient. Okay. Then we have nearby. When you gain a nearby card, you get a plus buy. So so if you buy a card that has the trait nearby, you get an extra buy. Maybe you have some more money. That could be useful. You get another card, buy another card. That's pretty cool. Inspiring. After playing an inspiring card on your turn, you may play an action from your hand that you don't have a copy of in play. So I don't know, let's just say the Fortune Hunter was inspiring, okay? And you play an action card from your hand that you don't have a copy of in play. So let's say you play this first, and it's an inspiring Fortune Hunter. Then you may play another action card from your hand. That's pretty cool, as long as it's not something you haven't played. So it's basically letting you play another action card. That's pretty cool, especially since Fortune Hunter doesn't give you an extra action. That's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool trait. Inspiring is definitely a cool trait. Inherited. This one has a setup. So you start the game with an inherited card in place of a starting card you choose. So basically, if Fortune Hunter was we're just probably going to keep using Fortune Hunter as these traits, but if, for instance, Fortune Hunter was picked for inherited, then you could put this into your starting deck before the game even begins and replace it with one of your starting cards, like one of your estates or one of your coppers. So basically, instead of starting with 3 estates, you could have 2 estates, a fortune hunter, and 7 coppers for your starting deck. That is cool. Man, I love this card, Inherited. Man, that is just so cool. Man, awesome. Okay, Hasty. When you gain a Hasty card, set it aside and play it at the start of your next turn. So that's really cool. You gain a Hasty card. If it was Fortune Hunter, once again, you would get it, set it aside, and you get to play it at the start of your next turn. That's pretty cool for whatever card ends up being the Hasty card. Friendly. At the start of your cleanup phase, you may discard a friendly card to gain a friendly card. So, especially if it's an action you weren't able to utilize, you could simply discard it at the start of your cleanup phase and gain another friendly card. Or another card that happens to be whatever card you discarded that is the friendly, that has the trait friendly on it, right? That's pretty cool. I like that. I suppose, you know, you can also just not play a particular action if that you want to get that sooner. Fawning. This trait, when you gain a province, you gain a fawning card. So I like that a lot. Every time you gain a province, you gain whatever the action card that happens to be fawning. That's pretty cool, depending on what action it was, I suppose. Trait, Faded. When shuffling, you may look through the cards and reveal faded cards to put them on top or bottom. So that's interesting. So when you're shuffling, you may look through the cards and reveal cards that have this trait on them, and then you can either put them on the top or the bottom of your deck. So that's really cool. I mean, I suppose if it was a good card, maybe something that gave you +2 actions or something like that, I definitely probably want to put them on my top of my deck after shuffling. That's pretty cool. I like that. Look through the card. You may look through the cards and reveal. So that's pretty cool. I like that one too. Tireless. When you discard a Tireless card from play, set it aside and put it onto your deck at end of turn. So that's interesting. So at the end of cleanup phase, when you discard whatever that card may be that's Tireless, that has the Tireless trait, you can set it aside and put it on top of your deck at the end of turn. So basically, you can just play this again sooner. That's interesting. The Cursed. When you gain a Cursed card, you gain a loot and a curse. So whatever card ends up with this trait, every time you gain that card, well, you'll get a loot. So hey, that's not bad. But you'll also get a -point card too. So that's not good either. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. You get a loot and you get a -point card, basically. A double-edged sword kind of trait for sure. So, you know, if you decided to purchase a Fortune Hunter and it had the trait Cursed Fortune Hunter, then, well, you'd get a loot and you'd get a -point card. Pretty cool. Cheap. Cheap cards cost 1 less. So, once again, if the Fortune Hunter had the trait cheap, then instead of it costing 4 for the whole game, it would only cost 3 for the whole game. That's pretty cool. But that's basically what that means. That's a pretty cool trait. Now, I did play with this one. I played it with Enlarge. So that was an interesting game. So, anyways, follow the instructions of played Reckless cards twice. And then when discarding one from play, return it to its pile. So I did this with Enlarge, which is a duration card that basically trashes cards, and then you gain. So it's basically like a remodel. That's a duration card. You trash a card, you gain a card costing up to 2 more than it. But what this is letting you do is it's letting you do it twice. So since it lets you do it twice, and it's a duration card, that meaning you do it now and at the start of your next turn, you actually have to do it twice when you play it for Enlarge with this Reckless card. But then you also have to do it twice on your next turn as well, thanks to this Reckless trait, and then you lose it, it goes back to its pile. So it's like a one-time use, but you're using it 4 times because of enlarge. So we'll show you the card when we get to it. But yeah, that was interesting for sure. Trait. That's an interesting trait. Okay, then we have shy. At the start of your turn, you may discard 1 shy card for 2 cards. I had this one on Figurine, which was a treasure card that actually gave you cards, but a treasure card that gave you cards. Let you draw 2 cards. It came in handy because, you know, there was like a couple of times where I just wanted to draw a couple extra cards during the action phase, and, you know, Figurine is usually only played during the buy phase. So at the start of your turn, you may discard 1 shy card for 2 cards. Huh. So that worked out well, really well. Getting to draw 2 cards by discarding a figurine instead of playing it later. Cool, cool. The rich trait, when you gain a rich card, you gain a silver. So that's pretty simple and straightforward, that you're getting a silver every time you gain a card that happens to have the rich trait. So once again, if it was Fortune Hunter, every time you got a Fortune Hunter, you get a silver. Cool, cool. And then pious. When you gain a pious card, you may trash a card from your hand. So that's interesting. But basically, that's all of the different traits that come in this game. Now, this is going to be a 2-part review because this is already a pretty long video. So I'll get to the rest of the cards in the next video. See you guys in the next video, part 2.